Hundreds of millions of years ago, our world looked much different from today. A single landmass was home to the earliest prehistoric life forms. As the land began to split apart, species multiplied and adapted to their new environments. Along the way, mass extinctions wiped out many of Earth's early inhabitants. But life came back, stronger than before. Some 200 million years ago, a major extinction wiped out over half of all existing species, giving rise to a new ruling class: dinosaurs. Until the next mass extinction, which destroyed nearly all dinosaur species, resetting evolutionary progress once again. This extinction marked the bridge between prehistory and history. What came from it are the species that live today, including ourselves. And as we evolved, we began to ask questions about our past. Where do we come from? What came before us? To many of us, these questions burn with a deep desire for knowledge. To even fewer, these questions inspire a never-ending search for answers about our past.
So I think one of the reasons why I wanted to come up and work in Grand Prairie originally was because no one had ever spent a lot of time looking in this area, and even just more generally in northern Canada. And while Alberta has an amazing record when it comes to dinosaurs from the southern part of the province, we don't really know what's going on very much up here in the northern part of the province. So right now we're on the banks of the Wapiti River, which is one of the main rivers that runs through the area. And this river is actually one of the ones that has had some of the most important finds from this area so far. Probably in large part because it is such a big river, and so you get these nice big exposures, like the ones over there, that have a lot more opportunity to find bones and other interesting fossils simply because you can actually see them.
Alberta still remains one of the very best places in the entire world for dinosaurs. And of course, I'm more familiar with Alberta than I am with other parts of the world, although I work extensively in places like Argentina, Mongolia, and China. The wonderful thing about Alberta is that you can just walk out the back door in so many places in the province and you can collect dinosaurs. The biggest problem in the Grand Prairie area for finding fossils is just the fact that so much of the area is covered up either by glacial deposits or by forests or by farmland. And really, to find dinosaurs, you need rocks exposed.
Can you sniff the fossils out? It would be useful. It's one of those things where you come back to the same spots sometimes from year to year just because things change. The water comes up, it washes stuff away, it exposes new stuff. There might be something, or I mean, you may have found all the bones that were there to begin with and there's nothing else left. I was hoping because I'd found some big stuff, but it is what it is. Sometimes you just don't find stuff.
I don't think Albertans think about that Alberta is unique. I think they are so spoiled because you have a fossil resource which is so big and unlimited. In Denmark, where I come from, for instance, we have very few fossils. And when it comes to dinosaur fossils, we have barely any. I think the attitude towards fossils in Alberta is different because you all pretty much have it in your backyard, and therefore you think it's like that everywhere in the world, but it isn't.
So I know I found stuff when I was here last time. I found stuff lower down. But I mean, gravity only moves one way, so you can at least use that to your advantage. And, you know, look up from wherever the last fossil is that you found, and hopefully you might find something. However, I'm not terribly confident that I'm going to find very much more here because I don't see anything else.
Other problem in this area is just the fact where you do have river valleys, very often the river valleys have very steep cliffs on the walls. And as the dinosaurs erode out, essentially, they break up and pieces fall to the bottom of the cliff. But even if you find the skeleton, then you also have a cliff above you with a lot of rock that's going to have to be moved. So these are all sort of logistic problems that can be resolved, but not without expense.
There's tons of fossils that we know of from anecdotal evidence from over the past 100 years of dinosaurs being found in the Grand Prairie region. So we know the dinosaurs are here. It's a matter of putting in time to actually find the specimens and find these fossils so we can actually tell what life was like 75 million years ago around this area. Look at the fossil. It's actually a big chunk of petrified wood. You can tell that this is a chunk of a tree because you can actually see all of the lines in there, just like you would see on a tree that you find today. Trees have these growth rings in them. Trees had growth rings 75 million years ago as well. So I think I'm gonna take this back, actually. It's actually it'll actually be a useful teaching specimen for the class that I teach at the college here. They want to know when they find a funny looking rock, if it's a funny looking rock or if it's a fossil. So being able to bring in as much material into the class is actually really useful. Trying to be able to tell what is and isn't a fossil it's a bit of an art. It takes a long time to be able to figure that out well, to be able to know well which ones are and which ones aren't fossils. And that's why you get a lot of people coming into museums that bring in rocks that they think are fossils just simply because they look like something, but it's not actually a fossil. It's just a rock with a shape. So this is a chunk of some kind of dinosaur bone. Problem is that it's a small piece, so I don't actually know what it is beyond that it's a bone, and that it's big enough that sort of the only thing that it probably would have come from is a dinosaur. So yeah, I mean, like I say, it's a fossil. What it's from, other than a dinosaur, I don't know. But I mean, we know there's stuff around here because there's this and there's the stuff that I found nearby here a couple weeks ago that I can find it fairly easily. Whether I'm going to find anything that's actually significant or that can tell me anything more than there were dinosaurs in this area is, you know, always a little bit of an unknown.
Essentially what you have to imagine that Alberta was like in terms of climate, it was sort of like northern Florida is today. It wasn't tropical, so people have that idea that one's wrong. And what we know now, actually, is that dinosaurs probably did not like tropical regions anyway, because in tropical regions, which became very hot, it was harder for dinosaurs to find a comfortable temperature.
When we look at Grand Prairie 75 million years ago, we were much closer to the Arctic Circle, which means that the sunlight and the amount of light during different times of the year was going to be very different. As well, there was a huge inland sea, which would have led to a much greater amount of precipitation. I think it's really interesting to look at just the vast array of animals and plants and everything else in the ecosystem to try and understand how these ancient environments would have actually looked.
Well, Grand Prairie is a difficult place to look for fossils, but there's simply less exposure, and that means that the amount of time and money and sweat and tears required to find a nice dinosaur or a nice specimen of any fossil vertebrate is just a little higher in this part of the province. Well, the significance of the Philip J. Currie Dinosaur Museum here in Wembley, I think, is tremendous for paleontology in the Grand Prairie area and in northern Alberta in general. It provides a focal point for display of fossils, for research on fossils. It provides a place where fossils can be deposited after being collected in the field, and just a venue for really showcasing the region's tremendous paleontological richness.
Back in the year 2000, collected a duck-billed dinosaur and found more dinosaur footprints, and I just realized just how good the area was. So we started intensifying our interest in the area, realizing that if we didn't do it, nobody else was going to do it. And so along with the local amateurs, people at the Grand Prairie Regional College and so on, we started a more aggressive program that started turning up more and more material. And basically once you got the ball rolling, it's like a snowball going down a hill. It just picks up more and more momentum. And now we finally reached a stage where I would have loved to have been in the late 1970s already.
The Pipestone Bone Bed is a site where we find enormous numbers of the horned dinosaur Pachyrhinosaurus. A bone bed is simply a geological deposit where fossil bones are concentrated. And in this case, it appears to be a site where a herd of Pachyrhinosaurus somehow met its demise. We don't know exactly what happened. It could have been a flooding event, for example, that killed all these individuals.
There's another tarp underneath, actually, that's half buried, and then that's going to be, it's sitting directly on top of the bones that we left exposed last year. So we're going to get that off today and start excavating those bones.
Pipestone Creek was an area that was discovered, in fact, by a high school teacher, Al Acosta, back in 1974. We came up to Grand Prairie, took a good hard look at Pipestone Creek bone bed, which we realized was richer than anything we had in the southern part of the province. So we were pretty excited about it.
The concentration of bones is immense. There can be a couple of hundred in a square meter if you work through the entire thickness of the deposit. So it's an incredibly productive source of horned dinosaur fossils, predominantly just Pachyrhinosaurus individuals of different ages.
With the yawl. And so you're going to make a little bit more debris, and then you can sweep that away as necessary. It's a little bit wet, which is unfortunate. Yeah. But yeah, just keep an eye on things. And you can do that over here too to try to just dig around the bones so that we can have them really, really well defined. And then once we can see them, the outlines of them really well, then I'll get in and we need to map them.
Okay.
The site is at least the size of a football field. We've actually taken rock samples at the site. And so we know it goes into the hill by 50 meters and is at least 100 meters long.
Top layer.
And we've never found the end of it. We're definitely going to be digging for a long time, but we only excavate about 2 to 3 square meters per year. And so the rate is quite slow, but I could definitely see us doubling the size of the quarry over the next several years.
For paleontology, it's not at random. We usually make a section and then we collect samples throughout that section. It might be a member in a formation or it might be a whole formation that we collect. But for macrofossils like leaf fossils and twigs and flowers and so on, it's a matter of finding the right areas where there are chances of finding that. And that is pure luck.
My job right now is I'm going through looking at the field IDs and then looking at the bone itself and seeing if I agree with the field ID. Because we have the volunteers, we can pull out a lot more material, but it does mean that the identification isn't always going to be right. So those of us that are in the field knowing how to identify stuff, we try to help out as much as possible, but there's always going to be stuff that even a trained eye won't be able to identify in the field. So this one is supposedly a phalanx, so that's one of the bones that make up the fingers. Judging by the size, it probably belongs to the foot and not the hand.
Fossils are a one-of-a-kind resource. Once they're destroyed or erosion has weathered them away, you can't get them back again. So really the importance of a paleontological museum is to get those fossils out of the fields, get them inside, protect them from the elements, and preserve them for future generations. Any of these fossils are irreplaceable, and that's really, I feel, the key importance of a museum is to preserve our natural heritage.
It's a museum that, in fact, is pushing research locally. It's working on public education. It's working towards preserving the fossils on a local basis. It's also an economic generator for the region.
Before this museum was built, there wasn't really anywhere for fossils or paleontology to be discussed in the area, at least not in a really big and kind of interesting way. By having a museum here in the area, the people of the area are able to see all of the really interesting things that are lying beneath their feet. And as a paleontologist, I think it's really helpful too, because it's brought a lot of attention to the fact that there are so many fossils in this area. And just the very presence of the museum being here has meant that there are now more people going out and looking for fossils in the local area. And what that means is more eyes on the ground, and the more people you have looking for fossils, the more fossils you're going to find. So we're going down to the Red Willow River. Specifically, we're going down to the area where the Red Willow Falls is. People have been finding bones here for decades. But it was only really within the last maybe 10 years, I'd say, that a lot more material has been found. Things that are actually identifiable and that can tell us what actually was living here beyond just it being another dinosaur. The area itself is also pretty unique in that it preserves a lot of soft tissues, in particular skin impressions from dinosaurs, mainly herbivorous, duck-billed, hadrosaurid dinosaurs. And so with a place like this where you're finding lots of really interesting skin impressions, it can actually tell you a lot about even species that we thought we knew fairly well. So animals like hadrosaurs, we've known about them for centuries at this point, but we're still finding out all sorts of new information about what they actually looked like on the outside, not just what their bones looked like. But I've been meaning to get this thing for the last 4 weeks. I should have done it when I was out here before. And I know that by next spring, the water will be so high that it would have washed it away. So if I didn't grab it now, it would have been gone probably before the next time I would get out here. Okay. I can't feel my toes. Oh, yeah. Okay. It might just look like a big chunk of coal at first, but what it actually is most of a fossilized tree stump. So obviously there would have been more of it coming off this way and this way. If we take this back and we cut it into sections, which is probably what we're going to do with it, you can actually really see the different growth lines that are in the tree itself. And we can use that to try and understand a little bit more about climate and temperature and what the environment was like 75 million years ago when this tree got buried in the sand.
I think when you go out, you know that you won't always find something very cool, and you are just really happy when you do find something that is reasonably well preserved and good looking and something you can work with. And yes, you do know that you are not finding everything there is to be found. As a paleontologist with the training we have, we know we won't find everything, but we will find a good amount, and we are satisfied when we have luck.
To be able to understand both where we've come from and where we're headed to. When we talk about all of the enormous changes that are going on in the world around us today, with climate change and the melting poles, these are things that have actually happened in the ancient past on more than one occasion. And so by looking to the ancient past and the fossils of the past, we can get a better understanding of just how the environments and the animals living in those environments have responded to these massive changes in their ecosystems. We might not have a very good understanding of where we are going right now. And without fossils, we wouldn't even know that things like extinctions existed. Satellite images in general provide us a really good glimpse of at least what we might find when we go out there. And it can tell us where we can find exposed rock. And that exposed rock is where we need to go to look for fossils. You see that one almost bare tree sticking right there, like over? Yeah, like right here. Sometimes it might not be possible to access an area by road or overland in any way, so we may have to think about where are the access points by canoe or by jet boat. In some cases, when we're working in much harder to access areas, much more remote areas, we may have to think about using things like helicopters or other air support. It's gonna be damp in spots here, obviously. I gotta find the location again. Oh, okay, I did mark it. Look at that. Trying to figure out where exactly this thing is like kind of it's an art more than a science half the time.
Charcoal?
Charcoal and what looked like a tiny bit of a fossil, but I don't know where the other half of the tiny bit of a fossil is. So I think it's really important that we go out and we collect these fossils because this is the only record we have of what life was like on this planet for the last 500 million years and further back than that. A number of bones from a single species of dinosaur. And while that bone bed can tell us an incredible amount about that one animal, it doesn't really tell us a lot about the other animals that were living in the same area at the same time. And so we really need to search out these different areas to get a fuller picture of what the landscape was like, what kind of animals were interacting with each other. Basically, you can kind of think of the fossil record as telling you a story. Sometimes you get an entire page that's very, very detailed with what's going on. But if all you ever do is look at that same page over and over again, you'll never be able to understand what the complete story actually is. What's this? Right, so this is something. I don't know what, but it's something.
Yeah.
This is more something. It's, you know, there's bits of bone here going right in so that when I break it, it looks that much more spectacular.
That's right.
I'm just gonna, so the tendons are generally strong enough for me to just pop them out. But at very least, it's another fossil, and it says that yes, there are for sure dinosaurs at this locality. And it's something that's at least identifiable versus just a chunk of random bone. Going to boat. Okay. I get this phone call around noon. They're like, Matt, we found a full skull, a complete skull. I was like, that's awesome news. How are you gonna get it out? We haven't figured that part out yet. I'll grab my canoe, I'll be down there in, 45 minutes or so, paddled down by myself and met him in here, and we just threw the skull in the canoe and paddled it the rest of the way down. Because otherwise, hauling that skull out of here, up a cliff, through the bush, would have taken us probably the better part of a full day. The body block was a little bit different.
Yeah, I guess, eh?
Hey, helicopter guy, you said you'd move a fossil for us if I called you. Do you want to move a fossil? Oh yeah, sure. Can I meet you guys there at 4 o'clock this afternoon? Yes, absolutely. So this is actually, I'm pretty sure this is actually part of the hadrosaur right here. There were bones still going into the hillside. So when the large body block, so the block with all the various limbs and ribs and this kind of thing, when that block was taken out, there was still this bone going into the hillside.
Certainly it is tedious work and you have to have the right mindset, I think, but it is enjoyable. The best part is, of course, seeing the specimen unveiled as you go and seeing these bits of bone and pieces of anatomy that have been, trapped in the rock for 70 million years and being the first one to see it as it's coming out of the rock. Very, very cool.
And you start with the bigger equipment and you work your way smaller and smaller as you get closer to it. So by the time we're down to the bone surface, we're in fact using dental tools in most cases, including just dental picks and needles. And a lot of that work ends up being done in the lab, of course, with microscopes. So trying to prepare a big dinosaur with needles, it's a challenge.
This is an important specimen for a few different reasons. Number one, it's an articulated skull, which is fairly rare from northern Alberta. And we were very excited about that because, number one, skulls are great to find. Number two, it looked like a small skull. And number three, from what we could see of the shape of it, it looked like it might actually be a new species that we hadn't seen up in Grand Prairie before. So to date, in the Grand Prairie area, we haven't found any crested hadrosaurs. All we've found are the ones with the solid heads, like Edmontosaurus, which has been published from up in that area. In the fields, we could see what looked like a crest on this, and now as it's being prepared, it looks like it's got a crest. So this is a first for the Grand Prairie area, a Lambeosaurian hadrosaur, which is a crested hadrosaur.
Fossil record, basically what it suggested in Alberta until, say, 20 or 30 years ago, was that everything that lived here pretty much was big and gigantic. And that's because of the fact that the complete skeletons are the big animals, the ones that are the most showy specimens. Small things, you've got to work a lot harder. So we're always happy when we find good skeletons of small dinosaurs like the one that Robin's working on.
So finally, after a lot of preparation and quite a lot of time spent on this specimen, it's at a stage where it's about as prepared as it's going to be. The head tells us a lot about what this animal is, so we can get a lot of good information from the features that we can see now that it's finally prepared. We have lots of good stuff that we can look at. The entire head is here, and we actually have parts of the neck as well, going up to the base of the skull. So we have the lower jaw here, and sort of the upper part of the head here. This is the duckbill beak right here, this little guy here with its sort of flattened area there. We have the eye socket right here where the eye would be sitting, and these little bones kind of squished up in a little pile here are actually parts of bone that surround the eye called a sclerotic ring, and it actually supports the eyeball in the living animal. Because this is a complete skull and a juvenile animal, it will likely be an important specimen for other researchers to come visit. And it will likely be a part of a lot of different research projects from researchers around the world. However, we still need to do the research to describe the rest of the body of this animal. And that will be part of ongoing research that will happen in the next few years. Towards the front of the jacket here, where the front of the animal would be, it's a little more articulated, and that makes sense because the head was just to the side here and quite close by, and it was articulated. So it seems like towards the front of the animal, the head and the neck and sort of the chest area, it's a little more articulated. And as we go further back, it seems a little less articulated. The bones have been jumbled up and kind of sloshed around, so they're no longer in the life positions that they would have been in the animal as it was living. Well, I'll finish up with this week, and then I'm off until fall. There's just not enough funding working on it, unfortunately.
We're actually living in a golden age of dinosaur collecting right now. It's a time period when there's more funding available than there ever has been in the past. There is more money available, but of course, like anything else, you're competing for money. And so it's a problem with paleontology because very often you don't have the results until you've done the work. How can you prove that you're going to have results if in fact you haven't done the work yet? So how do you get the money that's going to allow you to do it? So it is a catch-22 problem.
Right now we're sitting in the Dinosaur Discovery Gallery in Peace Region Paleontology Research Center in Tumbler Ridge. And our museum has been shut down since the end of March due to funding cuts. Getting the resources to do the exploration and also to do the field work, the research, it's a challenge for most paleontologists. People have this idea that all paleontologists are well-funded. Not true. There's very few that I know that are not struggling in one way or another.
And the reason that a lot of people equate Alberta with dinosaurs is because Alberta has actually invested in its fossil heritage, and they've deemed it important enough to put money towards it. Really, there's nothing that is more important in my mind than being responsible stewards for our heritage. This is the story of where we came from as a species, as a planet. This is the story of where we could possibly go as organisms. It's the present may be the key to the past, but the past lets us know what's possible, what has happened, and what could potentially happen. And if we don't properly care and protect and respect the representation of that story, which are the fossil heritage and which is natural heritage in general, then we're going to lose that story, and we're going to lose a huge part of what makes us, us.
So doing work in northern Canada, and really anywhere remote in Canada, is logistically very difficult and often quite expensive. It's always a bit of a difficult thing to do, trying to put together big, complicated projects in areas that are hard to access, and never really being entirely sure if you're going to be able to have the funding to be able to pull it off. Keep your eyes out for bears. I'm looking around here, and we're in pretty prime bear country, right along the edge of the river here. So. For never having been here before, at least this looks promising.
There's areas that have not yet been explored that do have the potential to tell us more about the lives of dinosaurs and other animals that were alive during the Cretaceous, but you don't know unless you go out and look. And the going out and looking is the exciting part.
The fact is that paleontology is one of the best ambassadors for sciences. And so it gets a lot of people interested, and it's an approachable science. It gets people interested in the sciences, and maybe they're not going to go into paleontology, but it might make people that were a little reticent about going into sciences, actually think, hey, I might be able to do this.
What keeps me excited about working in the region is the amount of work that's still left to do.
So if it's 50, what if we did, because like we can come down to, so D is, so this is a smoky here. So what if we hit C and then kind of B1?
All set back there, guys. All set. Yeah. All set. Go. River meanders a lot. A lot of hairpin. Head over to Nose Mountain and Nose Creek. And then we'll follow Nose Creek between there and the Wapiti. There's a fair bit of exposure that I can... The east side? Yeah, so that we can get to the exposed rock. So you want to get to the face just below us here? Yeah, we can land on that ground.
Head up over this way and see what I can find them. What's most exciting for me is still being able to go out and find something new, knowing that there's all sorts of new things to still be found out there. The really fun thing about paleontology is that it's not done. There is still a ton of work to be done, and that we actually are finding more new dinosaurs now than at any point in the past. These clay of rip-up clasts are actually a good thing to look for and can sometimes tell you that there might be fossils in this area. And obviously there is fossils in this area. There's fossils, by the looks of it, all around this layer in this block. Right in here is what looks like a tooth of something like a Tyrannosaur, maybe Albertosaurus, something like that. Probably not Tyrannosaurus Rex. But somehow I have to figure out how to chip it off the bottom of this block without dropping it and breaking it. If you look extremely closely, right in there, you can see the impressions from the serrations on the tooth. So it's definitely a dinosaur tooth. Hey guys, I think I found something else over here. I won't, no, I will guarantee it. No, we're looking at a bone bed. Actually, a literal ton of bone here. For this, like, 20 meters, I can see fossils everywhere in this 20 meters right here. So to give you a bit of context, okay, so I can see this is a bone all in here. This is a bone going in here, this is a bone going on here, this is another one coming out here, this is one here, this is a different one here. This is very, very rare. I have never found a bone bed like this. Well, this is probably going to be the big project that we're going to be working on this year based on the volume of material that I see. I think there's no reason why this can't be just as productive and abundant as pipestone. This is a Tyrannosaur tooth. I didn't see this before. I just saw this right now. So I might try and take this out. It's small enough that I can probably pop it out. Even if it comes out in a couple pieces, it looks like it'll go back together easily enough. This is just full of stuff. There is so much stuff here. And so much of it is just right at the surface, just waiting to be, this is a bone. This is a bone. There's more bones, there's bones, and more bones, and always more bones. This is definitely a Tyrannosaur tooth, based on the size, the fact that you've got these serrations coming down like that. I have never found a bone bed this dense, this rich. Now, the only problem is, like with most things, how do we get it out of here? So this whole femur, or whatever kind of bone it is, so we're talking about animals that are probably, 2-3 tons, sort of small elephant-sized and super exciting. But if you were to come back here for a week and just kind of like hang out and dig up the bones, a worthwhile helicopter trip. finding something like we did today, that's really where the helicopter shines, is being able to get us into places that we've never been to before, to look at rocks that we've never seen ever before, and then finding something that awesome, that dense, that diverse. That was something that was just leaves me not with very many words left to say. Obviously, there's a lot more water today than there was a week and a half ago. I think we can keep going. Getting the path down here cleared and marked out now means that we can not have to worry about wasting our time finding a path down. There was no water flowing through here whatsoever, because we crossed right here. Like I went across the river right there, but I don't want to like try and go across that and just end up like dragged, you know, half a mile downstream. It's been raining for the last few days, so the water's come up quite a bit. And actually the bone bed layer itself is just covered. Probably the first few inches is now covered by water. I mean, you can see the black layer, and right near the base of the black layer is where most of the fossils are coming out of. There are a few a little bit higher as well, but obviously, even if we got across through what's a bit of a raging torrent right now, it would still be pretty hard to actually do anything because everything would be under a few inches of water. With the water the way it is, we didn't get to really work on the bone bed itself. We decided to take a bit of a walk on the side that we could get to, check out the exposures that we could at least get to today. We found more fossils. So it's a pretty good sign that there's that many bones still all close together, you know, in good condition. Next time we come back, we're probably gonna have to come and check this spot out as well.